I never thought I'd see the day I'd be sitting in a hospital, watching my only daughter fight for her life on an operating table. The smell of disinfectant was so thick it was hard to breathe, and the constant beeping of machines became the soundtrack to my worst nightmare. Every second stretched into an eternity. I was clutching the edge of my chair so tightly my knuckles were bone white, just praying for her to make it through, praying for just one more chance to see her smile again. But as I sat there, lost in a sea of fear, one single thought cut through the fog, sharper and more painful than anything else. Her husband, the man she had given her heart to, the man who was supposed to be her rock, was nowhere to be seen. He wasn't pacing the hallway like a worried husband should. He wasn't on the phone, updating family. He wasn't even there to offer a single word of comfort. No, he was out. Celebrating. I couldn't believe it, so I checked my phone, and my blood ran cold. Teary, it was clear as day on social media. Pictures, videos. Him dressed to the nines on the deck of a yacht, a wide grin on his face, holding a glass of champagne. He was laughing, surrounded by strangers, with the vast ocean behind him, while my daughter's chest was literally being opened in surgery. Her husband was posing for photos, flaunting his carefree life for the world to see. Can you even begin to imagine what that does to a father? To see the little girl you once carried on your shoulders, the one you taught to ride her first bike, the one you swore you would always protect from harm, now lying helpless and alone, and the man who made his own vows to protect her, to love her in sickness and in health, had abandoned her in her absolute darkest hour. It doesn't just break your heart. It shatters it into a million pieces, and then forges those pieces into something hard, something cold. At first I tried to make excuses for him. It had to be an old photo, right? A misunderstanding, but the timestamps don't lie. These were live updates, posted in real time while she was on that operating table. There was no mistake. There was no excuse. There was only pure, unadulterated betrayal. And in that moment, sitting in that cold, sterile waiting room, something inside me shifted. The grief, the fear, it all crystallized into a single, burning purpose. I was no longer just a worried father. I was a man on a mission. I looked at that smiling, carefree photos of him, and I made a silent promise to myself, to my doctor. He will not get away with this. He thinks he's so clever, so untouchable. He thinks he can humiliate my daughter and walk away without a scratch. He is dead wrong. This isn't just a story about heartbreak and betrayal. This is the story of a father who transformed his grief into a raging fire. It's the story of how I meticulously uncovered every single one of his secrets, every lie he ever told, and how I crafted a plan to systematically dismantle the world he built on those lies. I was going to make him pay for every tear my daughter shed, for every moment of pain he caused her. So, you're going to want to stick around. Because what I did next, he never, ever saw it coming. You won't believe how this story unfolds. Follow along to see how a father's love. The first night after my daughter's surgery felt like the longest of my life. I sat in that hard plastic chair beside her bed, my body aching, my eyes glued to the steady rise and fall of her chest. She looked so pale, so fragile, hooked up to a dozen machines. The doctor said the surgery went well, but recovery would be a long road. All I could do was sit there, feeling utterly helpless, and just pray she'd find the strength to fight her way back. But as I kept that vigil, one thought was like a poison, slowly spreading through me. Where was her husband? Where was the man who should have been right here, holding her hand, begging the doctors for updates, promising her he'd never leave her side? Every time the door creaked open, my head snapped up, hoping it was him. Every time my phone buzzed, I prayed his name would flash on the screen. But there was nothing. Just silence. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. When I finally looked at my phone, the truth hit me harder than a punch to the gut. There he was, my daughter's husband, posting pictures of himself on a yacht, dressed to the nines, a glass of champagne in his hand, grinning from ear to ear, surrounded by laughter and other women. My daughter was fighting for her life, and he was out celebrating like he was king of the world. Do you know what that does to a father? It's not just betrayal. It's humiliation. I raised my girl to believe in love, to trust in loyalty, to give her whole heart, and this man, the one she trusted above all others, was treating her like she was nothing more than a burden he was happy to cast aside. Rage boiled in my chest, a white-hot fire, but I forced it down. Because rage without action is just noise. When my daughter finally opened her eyes, her voice was a faint, trembling whisper. She looked at me and said, "Dad, where is he?" That question shattered me. How could I possibly tell her the truth, that the man she loved was too busy partying to even ask if she was alive? I couldn't. So, I lied. I told her he was working late, tied up on calls, that he cared but just couldn't get away. And she believed me. She gave a faint, tired smile and closed her eyes again, comforted by my lie. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would protect her from the truth until she was strong enough to handle it. But I would also make sure that one day, when she was ready, she would see him for exactly who he was, and by then, I would have already made him pay for it. That very night, I started digging, not with a shovel, but with silence and patience. I went back to his social media. More posts, more smiles, the same party from different angles, each photo feeling like a slap in the face. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He was flaunting it. That arrogance just fueled my resolve. I started reaching out to people I knew, mutual friends, us acquaintance. At first, they were quiet. But a father's grief makes you relentless. I pushed, I asked sharper questions, and finally, someone slipped. They admitted what I had feared. This wasn't the first time. My daughter's husband had been living a double life for months. Nights out, he called work. Trips, he labeled business. There were nothing but escapes. Parties, yachts, women, and it was all paid for with money that wasn't his. That was the twist of the knife. He hadn't just betrayed her heart. He had stolen her future, the savings she had worked so hard for. The money she had trusted him with it was gone, spent on drinks, on dinners, on shallow luxuries. Can you imagine that? Sitting in a dark hospital room, watching your child sleep, and realizing the man she trusts is robbing her blind while she lies broken in a bed. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms, but I didn't make a sound. I couldn't act yet. Guys like him thrive on charm. They twist words, play the victim, and spin lies so well that even the truth starts to look suspicious. If I confronted him now, he'd gaslight her, turn her against me, and I would lose her trust. I couldn't let that happen, so I stayed silent. I smiled when she asked about him. I reassured her with words that burned my tongue, and in the shadows, I began to build my case. I took screenshots of every post. I saved every photo. I started gathering receipts, slowly, piece by piece. I was weaving a net so tight that when the time came, there would be no escape. You see, real revenge isn't about shouting or throwing punches. It's not about violence. True revenge, it's about patience. It's about letting a man dig his own grave while you stand by, silent and steady, waiting for the perfect moment. And when that moment arrives, you don't push him in. You simply bury him under the weight of his own lies. That moment was getting closer, because the deeper I dug, the more secrets I uncovered. And the truth I found next, well, it left me absolutely breathless. Those first few days after my daughter's surgery were a blur. The hospital's sterile smell, the constant beeping of machines, it all just faded into the background. But while everything around me was hazy, my mind was crystal clear. I split my time between her bedside, holding her hand, and my own secret investigation. To the nurses and doctors, I was just another worried father. But in reality, I was a hunter, patient, silent, waiting for the perfect moment. Every time I looked at her, so fragile in that hospital bed, I remembered why I was doing this. She still believed in him. She'd whisper his name, asking when he'd visit, if he'd called. And I had to lie. He's swamped with work, honey, but he sends his love. He's checking in all the time. Each lie felt like a physical weight on my chest. But what choice did I have? If I told her the truth now, the shock could shatter her recovery. But the second I stepped out of that hospital, my grief turned to cold resolve. I went back through everything, every bank statement, every credit card transaction, every digital footprint he thought he'd covered. I discovered accounts in his name my daughter knew nothing about. I found receipts for lavish dinners, weekend trips that were definitely not for business, and gifts for someone who wasn't my daughter. He wasn't just being careless, he was arrogant. He was strutting through life like the world owed him, while my daughter was fighting for hers. The deeper I dug, the colder my rage became. He wasn't just cheating, he was systematically draining their joint accounts. The money they were saving for a house, for the family she dreamed of, was gone, vanished into a black hole of champagne and cheap thrills. He hadn't even stopped. While she was in surgery, he was out spending, celebrating his freedom. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The real gut punch came when I finally tracked down the woman he'd been seeing. She wasn't some stranger. She was part of their circle of friends, a woman who'd smiled at our family dinners, who'd sat across from me at holidays, praising their perfect marriage. She was in our home, eating our food, all while helping him betray my daughter. When I confirmed it, something inside me just snapped. Betrayal is one thing, but this was different. This was a betrayal that wore a familiar face, that disguised itself as a friend. That is unforgivable. I decided to call her first, not him. I kept my voice calm, pretending I knew less than I did. It's amazing what people will admit when they think you're a fool. She told me everything. About a trip on a yacht, about the endless nights out, about how he complained his wife was too much trouble, that she was holding him back. That's how he described the woman who had given him everything. I thanked her for her honesty, each word like poison in my mouth, and hung up. His time was coming. But not yet. Not until every single piece of my plan was in place. So I waited. I visited my daughter every day, holding her hand, feeding her the lies that protected her. But in the shadows, I was building my case. Bank records, text message screenshots, witness statements. I called in favors from people who know how to find things the law sometimes misses. The picture that emerged was darker than I could have imagined. He wasn't just a bad husband. He was a fraud, a thief, a parasite who thought he was completely untouchable. And men who think they're untouchable are always the easiest to bring down. Late at night, sitting in my car in the quiet hospital parking lot, I'd think, how do you truly punish a man like this? Taking his money isn't enough. Exposing him publicly feels too quick. I wanted him to feel the same crushing helplessness he'd inflicted on my daughter. I couldn't just lash out in anger. He'd find a way to escape. The plan had to be surgical, leaving him with absolutely nothing. I didn't want him just hurt. I wanted him ruined. Then, one evening, he finally showed up. He waltzed into the hospital room, calm and smug, like a king visiting his subject. He kissed my daughter's forehead, whispered some empty words of concern, and smiled that rehearsed, charming smile. But then his eyes met mine across the bed, and in that one glance, the war was declared. He knew that I knew. He thought his charm and my daughter's love would be his shield. He underestimated me. I'm not just any man. I am a father, and a father does not forgive the man who parties while his daughter bleeds. Driving home that night, his smirk was burned into my mind. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. The time for patience was over. It was time for preparation. I started with his finances, reaching out to contacts who could trace every hidden asset, every offshore account, every secret debt. Men like him never work alone. They always leave a trail of accomplices. I was going to follow every single one. This was no longer just about a broken heart. This was about a fundamental betrayal of trust, of family, of every decent value I ever taught my daughter. And the more I uncovered, the clearer my plan became. I wasn't just going to confront him or expose him. I was going to dismantle his entire life, piece by piece, until the man who thought he was a god was left with nothing but the rubble of his own making. And when the time was right, I would make sure my daughter saw the truth with her own eyes. Not from me, not from rumors. She would see it in the undeniable, total collapse of the man she thought she loved. Because the most powerful lesson in truth is watching a lie crumble before you. A man like him, arrogant, charming, shameless, doesn't fear accusations. He laughs at them, twists them. To make him fall, I had to hit him where it truly mattered. His pride, his money, and his fake reputation. My first move was subtle. I started talking to his colleagues, the people he bragged about impressing. I didn't make accusations. I just planted seeds. A carefully worded question about his investments. A casual comment about his expensive tastes. It was a whisper campaign. An offhand remark in the right ear became opposite gossip. Gossip turned into professional suspicion. He was so busy admiring his reflection that he never even noticed the foundations of his empire were rotting away beneath his feet. He was so focused on the war he thought we were fighting. He didn't see the real attack was coming from all sides. And soon, very soon, the walls were going to come crashing down. You won't want to miss what happens next. But whispers weren't enough. I needed undeniable proof to be revealed at the perfect moment. So, I began to create a file. Not just a folder, not a simple stack of papers. This was a file so detailed, so irrefutable, that no one could ever dismiss it. I gathered screenshots of his social media posts, receipts from the money he stole, and written statements from people he betrayed. Every single lie he ever told, I nailed down with cold, hard truth. And to be safe, I made sure copies of that file were secured in places he could never, ever reach. Do you know the deep satisfaction of building a trap, piece by piece, knowing your prey is still out there dancing freely, completely blind to the noose tightening around their neck? That was my first taste of revenge. But the second step was even sweeter. I tracked down the woman he had been with, the so-called friend who had smiled so sweetly at my daughter's wedding. I didn't threaten her. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I played the exact same game he did. I let her know that I had every single detail of her affair, every secret she thought was buried forever. And then, I gave her a choice. Disappear quietly from his life, or be exposed publicly right alongside him. The raw fear in her voice, when she realized just how much I knew. That was the first time I felt a sense of true justice blooming in my chest. As you can imagine, she backed out of his life almost instantly, cutting all ties, leaving him suddenly and completely without his partner in betrayal. And the best part? He had no idea why. Hook after hook, piece by piece, I was slowly dismantling him. But I was far from finished. Oh, no. My daughter was still in that hospital bed, still recovering, still clinging to the image of a husband who had already betrayed her in the worst way possible. I couldn't let him just waltz back into her life, pretending everything was fine. So, I moved on to step 3, his finances. He thought he was so clever with his hidden accounts and his secret stashes of cash. But I had connections quiet. Careful people who owed me favors. They traced every one of his transactions, following the money trails like a hunter follows tracks in the snow. By the time they were done, I knew everything. His debts, his secret loans, the people he owed money to, and the enemies he didn't even know he had made. That's when I started pulling the strings. A quiet phone call here, a mysteriously delayed payment there, a discreet word to the right people. Suddenly, the debts he had been hiding so well began to surface. Creditors who had previously looked the other way were now demanding their money back immediately. His friends, the ones who partied with him on yachts, suddenly wanted repayment for past favors. His life, once so shiny and golden, was now cracking at the edges, and he still couldn't see my hand behind it all. Every move I made was deliberate, slow, and precise. I wanted him to feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. I wanted him to wake up one morning and realize his entire world was falling apart, with no idea how it all went wrong. But the real blow, the one that would destroy him completely, was still waiting. I bided my time. I waited until my daughter was strong enough to sit up on her own, to hold a conversation without drifting off. That was when I made my final move. I invited him to dinner, just the 3 of us. He walked in with his usual swagger, holding a bouquet of flowers, that fake smile plastered on his face. He thought he was still in control of the situation, but he had no idea what was waiting for him at that dinner table, because I wasn't just a grieving father anymore. I was the storm he never saw coming, and when I slid that file across the table toward him, all the color drained from his face. There it was, every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar, every secret woman, every night he had spent celebrating while his wife was fighting for her life on an operating table. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. My daughter's hands trembled as she began to read the truth with her own two eyes. That moment, that deafening silence was worth every sleepless night, every ounce of patience, every careful step I had taken to protect her. Because in that silence, the mask he wore finally crumbled, and my daughter saw the man for who he truly was. He reached for the file with shaking hands, flipping through the pages, his eyes widening with every line. For the first time, I saw something on his face that his arrogance could never hide. Pure, unadulterated fear. And for a man who thrived on power and charm, fear was poison. My daughter just sat there, frozen, her fingers trembling as she scanned the documents. Every receipt, every photograph, every stolen dollar was staring her in the face. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She didn't need to say anything. Her tears said it all for her. He tried to recover, of course. Men like him always do. He stammered excuses, claiming it was all a big misunderstanding, that the photos were old, that the financial accounts were just mistakes. But lies sound incredibly weak when the truth is already laid bare for everyone to see. And this time, I didn't stay silent. I had held my peace for long enough. But that was only the beginning of his downfall, because once the mask is gone, the world is eager to watch the fall. And I was going to make sure his fall was nothing short of spectacular. I leaned across the table, my voice low but sharp as a blade. While my daughter was dying, you were drinking champagne on a yacht. While she bled on a table, you were laughing with strangers. And now you sit here in my house, thinking you can talk your way out of this. His mouth opened, then shut again. He had no words, no weapon left to wield. And that was when I delivered the final cut. I told him the truth. Didn't he know that every copy of that file had already been sent to his employer, to the banks, to the people he owed, to the very authorities who had been waiting for proof of his schemes. He wasn't just losing my daughter, he was losing his career, his reputation, his freedom. The color drained completely from his face. He knew it was over. And my daughter, she finally saw him for what he was. No longer the charming husband she once believed in, but a hollow man, stripped bare, standing on the edge of ruin. Her tears turned to anger. She told him to get out, her voice shaking but stronger. Stronger than I had heard since before the surgery. And for the first time, I saw a spark of her old self return. He left that night, stumbling into the darkness, his world collapsing around him. But my revenge wasn't complete, not yet. Because men like him don't just fall. They crash. Within weeks, his debts caught up to him. The creditors I had quietly stirred demanded payment he couldn't make. His employer, presented with undeniable proof of his theft, cast him out without hesitation. His so-called friends disappeared the moment his money dried up. The world that once applauded him now turned its back. And soon, the law came knocking. Fraud, embezzlement, theft. The charges piled up, one after the other. I didn't need to lift a finger anymore. The net I had woven closed on its own, and he, once so smug, so invincible, was left scrambling, drowning in the very lies he thought would keep him afloat. As for my daughter, she was heartbroken. Yes, but heartbreak heals. Betrayal leaves scars, but scars can make you stronger. And now she had the truth. She had the chance to rebuild, to start fresh without the weight of his deceit. I told her the same words I told myself through it all. He may have stolen your love, your money, your trust, but he will never steal your strength. And as I watched her grow stronger, day by day, I knew my revenge was complete. Not because I destroyed him, though I did, but because I protected her, because I gave her the chance to rise again without him dragging her down. Do you know the sweetest part of revenge? It isn't watching the guilty fall. It's watching the innocent rise after the storm has passed. And that's exactly what I did. He thought he could celebrate while my daughter lay dying. He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. But he underestimated one thing. He forgot that behind her stood a father who would burn his entire world to ash before letting him win. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. In the end, my daughter found her strength again, not because of him, but in spite of him. She walked out of that hospital with scars on her body, Yes, but fire in her heart. And I knew she would never again waste her love on someone who didn't deserve it. As for him, he became a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. His name carried shame, his wealth turned to dust, and every lie he ever told wrapped around him like chains. He learned the lesson too late. You cannot build happiness on the broken trust of others. But this story, it isn't just about betrayal. It's about resilience. It's about how far a father will go to protect his child. And it's about the truth that no matter how dark the night, justice always finds its way. So if you ever face betrayal, remember that this patience is your weapon, truth is your shield, and time will always reveal the masks people wear. Do not let anger blind you. Let it sharpen you. Because when the moment comes, the sweetest victory is not in RevengeX and watching the liaress world crumble under the weight of their own deceit. He thought he could celebrate while my daughter lay dying. He thought he could live a double life without consequence. But he forgot one thing. I was watching, and a father never forgets. Justice was served. My daughter was saved. And he was left with nothing. And that, my friends, is the true ending. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. Until next time, stay strong.